Hey, welcome. This is Cam, and we're at the quarantine series again, and I'm with two great young friends of mine, two mentors, longtime mentors of my Y career, Eric Ellsworth and Andy Calhoun. Eric, introduce yourself and tell what you're doing today.
Hi, everyone. Eric Ellsworth here, former YMCA director. I worked for the Y for about 43 years and in 4 different YMCAs, and I've been enjoying retirement for about the past 15 months. And but I sure miss my Y career, and I miss all the people that became my friends over the years. But I'm just glad to be on this call. This is like old home week between Andy Calhoun and Cam Corder and myself. It doesn't get any better than this.
Yeah. Andy.
Yep. Well, I grew up in North Carolina, had an opportunity to come to Charlotte, and was only going to stay 2 or 3 years, and stayed 43. In fact, haven't ever left or moved away from Charlotte. And I came to the Y, fell in love, and I tell people I took a job, and it became a career, and then it became a calling. So I love, like Eric said, I just love the people in the YMCA. I love the mission and have seen it evolve and adapt and change over the years. And that's been wonderful. And a few of my years, I had an opportunity to work alongside Eric Ellsworth. We worked together in Charlotte, and that was one of the great, great blessings I had.
That's great. I tell you, really, we ought to take a session and do just about being a calling, in itself. Last year I emailed friends and I said, is it a calling for you? And when was it a calling for you? And it was great, the responses I got back. So I need to do a quarantine session on that. But both y'all are great leaders. Eric, when you were in Indianapolis, I would call you often and say, listen, let me vent a little bit. And Andy, being close in Charlotte, a couple times a year, we would just take those 2-hour lunches and, go. And y'all both give great counsel to me, make me feel good at the end. When I would walk out the door, hang up the phone. And so y'all manage such large, complex organizations, and watching from afar today of what, kind of is going on. And we're talking about leadership in a lot of the quarantine series that we do. Trust is number one for a leader. And how did y'all develop and build trust in your organizations, especially in such complex and large organizations?
Eric, you go first.
All right, thank you. Well, I just, there's a quote that just popped into my mind, and it's the one about people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I love that. I've always loved that. And so you have to, the reality is we really do care, and we really do care, and we want the best for the people who work with us and for us. But I think to build trust, I think you have to be a great listener. I think you have to really listen and let people know how much you want to learn from them as well. And so I really feel like also, I think sometimes people have to see you in order to trust you, have to see your character. You have to allow them to see your vulnerability, and it's okay to not have all the answers, not to know sometimes. So I just think being a good listener is maybe first. And I love the old open door policy where you're willing to, take a meeting with anyone and not feeling like you're, at some kind of a high level where you shouldn't keep your door open and be available to people so that they can share their thoughts and their concerns with you.
Yeah, that's great. Great comment. One of my board members shared with me today, he said, the book on my desk is, I hope I say this right, Humble is the New Smart. And I said, I need that book. That's good. So
that is good.
What about you, Andy? How did you develop trust?
Bridge off of Eric first. And one thing I'll point out, Cam, is that when I came to Charlotte in 1972, we only had one large branch, 2 small branches, and a camp. So we started small and grew. And there was a lot of benefit to that in terms of seeing the organization change. But to piggyback on Eric, I would say that trust is not spoken of from the podium or sold from the podium, because people, that's not going to matter to them as much as what Eric said. They want to see action, and they want to see a leader in situations that really starts to build trust. And I think also trust comes by one-on-one conversation, one-on-one communication, and one-on-one relationships, and that spreads the culture of trust to me. So it's really just building into what Eric said. And I know, Cam, from what you've done in Cleveland County, that's how you build trust, is relationship after relationship.
Who did you turn to when maybe your why was in crisis or trouble? Like I said, I called or would visit, but who did y'all lean on in your careers?
Well, I'll speak to that.
Yeah.
One thing is not waiting for the crisis to build a cabinet of people around you is important. And to be able to have 3 or 4 or 5 people you can really call on, hopefully some of those have skills that are similar to whatever crisis you're facing. But to have these folks that can gather around you with advice and prayer, that was so valuable to me. And sometimes they were board members. Sometimes they were friends from other venues, church or otherwise. But people who could give you another perspective, especially those that could give you perspectives that are different than the one I had myself.
Good. What about you, Eric?
Well, I wanted to add that usually when I was in a crisis, Andy Calhoun was supervising me, so he saw me in the middle of it. And if I'm, I recall one thing that I had really messed up on, and Andy and I were talking about it, and he proved to me that he was the supervisor of second chances and third chances, because he said, Eric, he said, I know you're going to be harder on yourself than I could ever be on you, so I'm just going to leave this up to you. And I just really learned a lot from that. I've worked 12 years under Andy's leadership in Charlotte, and I got to tell you, he was so kind, and so everything that he demonstrated was a teachable moment for me. So I just wanted to. And as far as having a trusted mentor, it's really important to have someone that's mentoring you and someone that you can trust.
Yeah, that's good. So how about on your
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
You read that just like you wrote it, Andy. That
That's
was
right. You wrote it to me an hour ago.
good. Well, what about on the faith part of your leadership? Who gave you counsel, or who gave you spiritual guidance, maybe, to kind of manage the crisis? Eric?
Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I always felt like there was that in the YMCA there were several leaders in each of the 4 Ys that I worked with that I depended upon. And in my mind, the faith aspect of the Y is about loving and serving and caring for others, and then using words if necessary. And so I think along the way, it's really exciting the way the Lord puts people in your life, regardless of the location. And maybe seeking that out is an important thing. Maybe, looking for those kind of people who inspire you, inspire your faith. And they're everywhere, and they're in the Y. And I hope that there in the future there will be more and more of those kind of great faith leaders that'll be a bigger part of our movement, in the years to come. And I think this virus has been maybe a calling back to more of the original mission of the Y. I've really been impressed with a lot of the things that the Ys have been doing across the country, but I feel there's a drawing back to some of the principles that of not just putting Christian principles into practice, but also that fellowship united in a common loyalty to Jesus Christ. And so I just I'm really encouraged about this time that we're in right now in the history of our YMCA nationally and worldwide. I think this is there's a coming back party getting ready to start.
Good.
Yep. I'll just tag on to that. Because they're so relevant to the YMCA, I'll say board members. We were very intentional about recruiting board members, of which not all, but many were very faith-centered, Christ-centered leaders. And I'll drop some names. One, Cam, that is a mentor to you. And to Eric, Jim Morgan was one of our great board chairmen. I'll also add Stick Williams and Pamela Davies, great faith leaders. Greg Johnson, some of these folks that really believe in the YMCA because of the Christian mission and really helped to mentor us, all three of us, in so many different ways. And I'm very thankful for that, because even though they were no longer chairman or not yet chairman, could go to them long after they were in office, and doors would be open and the advice would be honest, straightforward, and wise.
What's your hope? And Eric, you alluded a little bit, but what's your hope for the future of the Y?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that the Christian presence of the will increase in the Y. That's my greatest hope, and that's my hope really for the 42 years that I was working with the Y. That's always been my hope. And I learned so much from the leaders of the past, people that you all, the big names, I'll call them, John R. Mott, Luther Gulick, George Williams, D.L. Moody, Oswald Chambers, and the list goes on and on of these great leaders. And I think, and then in modern days, Hall of Famer Harry Brace and Andy Calhoun and my buddy Clark Baker and others who have continued that legacy of those great leaders. And I'd love to see more and more of those kind of leaders leading our YMCA's in the future. And I think it's kind of such a time as this. I really do think this is a great time. I want to talk about one other leader real quick, Cam, if I could. And her name is Amanda Moore, and she worked in the association in Indianapolis. And she was a remarkable leader, a young woman who always was courageous in her leadership, always said, yes, I'll do that, took on tasks that were unbelievable in scope and just did them with such dignity and grace and faith. And I'm hopeful about the future of the Y because of leaders like Amanda. And I love the way the Lord sometimes just plants a leader like that in his movement, the YMCA.
That's great.
That's just great. Once again, as I've been doing for decades, I'll build on Eric. I'll say too that I think the leader today is thinking past this panic and this pandemic and trying to imagine what the YMCA will be because it will be different. But like Eric, I believe it'll be better, stronger than it is now. And one thing that gave me such hope, who could have planned it? I don't believe in coincidences, and it's not a coincidence, but one of the other great leaders in our movement's history was Harold Smith, who was the head of the YMCA Retirement Fund, which many of us are so thankful for. But he left an incredible sum of money to develop greater Christian leadership, including the YMCA. So Eric and I are part of something called On Principle. This has given me as much or more hope than I've seen in so long, because it's about bringing on this grassroots movement, very much grassroots, but it's about identifying and raising up a new army of Christian leaders who have the skills to be great leaders overall, and to have them basically in a great way infect the movement with more Christian leadership and wise leadership, smart leadership, to be able to help us get through. I've got a lot of hope in that for the future, because we're just getting started. Eric and I just were part of our first class of those leaders, and many more are to come.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. I host a group of CEOs every fall, and it's usually around leadership. And Andy, you spoke to it, and Eric, I guess we Zoomed you and the two Erics in a couple years ago, and it's about leadership, and it's really about our faith. And I got the idea from years ago. You guys invited me up to Blue Ridge, Bill Phillips and Clark and you, Andy, and it was all these large YMCAs and me, sitting in those rocking chairs up there. But I had my chest out and felt so cool, to be among the royalty in the Y movement. But I really hope that this group has that. I mean, it's about inviting some younger CEOs into our group and saying, hey, this is the future. You're the future, and how we can perpetuate mission. So I'd love to expand, and I think there's opportunity maybe with Blue Ridge to give, because it struggles right now with what's going on, is let's give it a shot in the arm, and let's put some CEOs in some rocking chairs for a day, and let's just have, let's talk, just spend some time together this fall.
Yeah, that is so true. You're making me think, if you don't mind me jumping over just a little bit, because you made me think about when you talked about bringing folks to Blue Ridge. Both of you remember Paul Limbert,
Yeah.
who was head of the YMCA World Alliance, and he lived to be 100 years old. And thankfully, he ended up retiring and, in fact, passed away while he was living close to Blue Ridge. I had a chance to go see and hear him about 3 months before he died. And someone asked the question in our group, talk about the Christian mission in YMCA. What's going to keep that alive? And his response, after being thoughtful for a few moments, he said, we've got to keep the conversation going. We can never let the conversation die. The beauty is the health of that conversation about the Christian mission. And that has stuck with me ever since.
And Andy, I'd add to that too, that what Cam's doing here with these broadcasts is exactly what Dr.
Yes.
Limbert would have hoped for. This, having the conversation, having, meaningful conversations about the Christian mission of the Y, I think is just what Dr. Limbert would have enjoyed. He also said, because I was at that same meeting where you were there, and he said, if the Christian mission of the Y is still relevant, he said, I've found it's much easier to connect with a person than a principle.
Yes.
And he said, I know that we all want to put Christian principles into practice, but Dr. Limbert said, it's easier for me to connect with a person, and for me, that person is Jesus Christ. And I thought that was so profound that I just wanted to share that. And it's interesting to hear him state that at 100 years of age.
Yeah, so dynamic. I think the time I met him, he was wearing a bolo. I just thought he was so cool. Had that cool tie on. So, yeah, what a legend. And I remember, I guess I saw him early in my career, and I went, that's my goal. I want to be the head of the World Alliance or YMCA someday.
There you go.
Maybe it's not too late. Thank you guys so much for sharing your mission and rippling and making such an impact across the movement of our YMCAs. Y'all have a large family tree, Y family tree. I'm proud to be part of that family tree. But thanks, guys, for spending some time with us and sharing.
Cam, thank you. I've often described you as the mayor of the YMCA in North Carolina and beyond. You lived it out again today.
Oh, I don't know about that. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.